Okay, so let's get right into this. What started out as a pretty straightforward piece of crypto legislation has, well, completely exploded into a massive political war in Washington. We're talking some of the biggest names in finance and tech going head to head. And right in the middle of it all, your digital dollars.
So this bill is called the Clarity Act. And, the goal was supposed to be simple. Finally bring some clear rules to the crypto world, which, let's be honest, can be pretty chaotic. But instead of creating any clarity, it's kicked off this all-out battle that's really showing how nervous the traditional banking system is.
And this is where it gets really, really interesting. At the absolute heart of this whole fight are stablecoins, which are basically digital dollars. The banking industry is throwing everything it has, and I mean everything, to stop any version of this bill that would let these digital dollars pay you interest. So the big question is, why? Why do they care so much?
Well, to solve that little mystery, you just have to do one thing: follow the money. And when you do, it paints a very clear picture of a massive, multi-billion-dollar reason for banks to keep the financial system exactly the way it is right now.
So let's just look at the numbers for a second. This data from the FDIC shows that the national average interest rate on a savings account is less than 0.5%. I mean, come on. Banks take your money, they lend it out for way, way more, and they just pocket the difference. It is an incredibly profitable business model for them.
And just how profitable are we talking? Well, get this. In a single quarter, just one bank, JP Chase, made $25 billion from what they call net interest income. That is pure profit they're making by not paying you and me more for the money that's just sitting in our accounts.
And you know what? They're not even trying to hide it anymore. On a recent earnings call, a top executive at JP basically said the quiet part out loud. They see stablecoins that could pay you a competitive yield, not as some cool innovation, but as a, and I'm quoting here, dangerous and undesirable threat to their entire business.
Okay, so we've got the motive, right? Billions of dollars. Now, how does this actually play out in the halls of power in Washington? Well, it's a super complex political drama with some very, very powerful players. And trust me, each one has their own agenda.
So, on the surface, the banking industry looks like this one big unified group. You see these official letters signed by associations that represent thousands of banks all over the country. But here's the reality. The top 20 banks, they control 70% of the entire system. They're the ones calling the shots, and they often use smaller community banks as a kind of friendly face for their lobbying.
So it is super important to understand what we're actually talking about here. When you hear crypto, your mind might jump to a roller coaster like Bitcoin. But stablecoins are totally different. They are designed to hold a steady value, pegged one-to-one with the US dollar. Just think of it like a digital version of the money in your bank account, but one that could potentially earn you a much better return.
All right, now this is where the plot really thickens. One of the biggest names in crypto, Coinbase, seems to be playing both sides of the fence. We've got reports that they were privately telling other crypto companies, hey, back down on this whole yield thing. But at the exact same time, their public website was running a campaign telling their users to fight for their rewards. So what's really going on here?
And then there's this little detail, a brand new partnership between Coinbase and JP. Yep, that's right, the same bank that's leading the charge to kill stablecoin yields. It definitely makes you wonder what's being said in those closed-door meetings, right?
Now, this isn't just a battle of press releases and strongly worded letters. No, this is now being fought on the floor of Congress with some old-school hardball political tactics.
And what's the weapon of choice? Amendments. A mind-boggling 137 last-minute amendments were filed for this one bill. This is a classic legislative trick, by the way. You just swamp a bill with so many changes that it slows everything down, it gets all tangled up, and hopefully, from their perspective, it just dies a quiet death in committee.
But look, this kind of fight, it's not new. It's really just the latest chapter in a very, very long story. Way back in the 30s, Regulation Q banned interest on some deposits. Then, decades later, when money market funds became a threat, the banks lobbied to get it repealed. They lobbied to tear down the wall between commercial and investment banking. The pattern is crystal clear. When they're faced with competition, they work the system to change the rules of the game. So, just when you thought this whole thing couldn't possibly get any more complicated, a legislative curveball gets thrown into the mix and it has just completely scrambled all the political math. So what's this big curveball?
Well, there's talk of attaching a completely separate bill to the Clarity Act, one that's all about going after the high fees that credit card companies like Visa and MasterCard charge stores. And just like that, this move yanks a whole new set of corporate giants, with their own huge lobbying machines, right into the middle of this crypto fight.
So why is this such a big deal? Because it completely scrambles the politics of it. A Republican who is probably going to vote for the crypto bill might now vote against it because of the credit card part, and a Democrat who is against it might now be for it. It turns what should have been a pretty predictable vote into a total political free-for-all.
So, with all this complexity, this intense opposition from the banking lobby, and all these last-minute political games, the future of this bill and your ability to earn a real yield on digital dollars is, well, it's completely up in the air.
And you can literally see the impact of all this chaos in the prediction markets. Not that long ago, the odds of this bill passing were a pretty healthy 70%. Today, they've plummeted to just over 50%. I mean, it is basically a coin toss at this point.
You know, this entire wild showdown really just boils down to one fundamental question. As new financial technology comes along that could actually benefit everyday people, who gets to write the rulebook? Is it the established giants of old money trying to protect their turf? Or is it the innovators trying to build something new? The answer to that question is going to shape the future of finance for every single one of us.